For Illinois Public Media, I'm Harrison Malkin. Today I'm doing the third of a series of sit-down interviews of Congresspeople and congressional candidates ahead of the November general election. For this show on Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022, I'm speaking with Democratic Congresswoman Robin Kelly. Robin Kelly is in the 2nd District, and she's facing off against Republican Thomas Lynch. I'm with Congresswoman Robin Kelly at her office in Madison, Illinois. Thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's good to see you. First, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your political background. Some of our viewers don't know you, and now you're in their district.
Right. Well, as you said, I'm Robin Kelly. I represent the 2nd Congressional District of Illinois. I was a special election, so I've been in the seat since April of 2013. So next year will be my 10th anniversary. Prior to that, I was the Chief of Staff for I was the Chief Administrative Officer for Cook County, the 2nd largest county in the United States. And prior to that, the Chief of Staff for Alexi Janulius. And then I was also a state rep for 4 years. And before that, worked for local government. So I've actually worked on every level of government. But my background is really social service, I would say, and counseling. And just really, I've been in the human service business, I think, my whole life.
I know you studied psychology at Bradley University. How has that informed your politics?
Well, it's funny. I have an undergrad in psych, a master's in counseling, and a PhD in political science. And I always say the psych and counseling helped me much more on this job than the PhD in political science, because you meet all kind of people from all kind of backgrounds, whether in your party or not in your party. And then also you have all kind of constituents, and my district is so diverse. It's urban, suburban, and rural already, and that will be exacerbated when I come into my new district in January.
Do you think it's created some more compassion as well when you're talking to voters and thinking about the issues facing people in your newly drawn district?
You know what? When I looked at my district before and now, I really look at 5 things. Most people want a roof over their head, a job, health care, want to live in safe communities, and want good education for their children, no matter where you live. So that's kind of the take that I take. I lived in Peoria many, many years, so I've been in what, for me, coming from Manhattan and New York City, that was rural to me, even though Peoria's changed some, now, and I live in the suburbs now. So I've kind of had a taste of many different lifestyles. My grandparents had a small farm in southern Jersey, so I've lived in more, rural parts, at least for the summer. So I think I already had the compassion, and I think the psych and counseling helped me with that also. But I really try to look at people as people.
Can you just say a bit more about the newly drawn district and what it's going to be like representing, people in rural areas and also people in Chicago, and then maybe your experience as well in Central Illinois, bridging that divide that does exist?
Again, I try to look at the simple things that people want to live, and not, like, because you live here, you might feel a certain way. Like, I'm very active in the gun violence prevention space, and I know as I go south in my district, people may have a different take, but it's not that I'm against guns. I just am against what has been going on for too many years now, and it's spreading more and more and more. But I'm urban, suburban, and rural, and I've gotten very much involved with my farmers. I have a barn hall meeting every summer, and where not only my farmers, other farmers come too, Democrat, Republican, Independent, and I do a lot of listening. I've won awards from the Farm Bureau, so I just want people to know that, don't feel like I'm not going to support you and your issues, because I don't think that my, farmers would say that. Across the board, like in my urban areas, they talk about crime, but in my suburban areas also, and even Kankakee that I have right now, people talk about taxes and education, and each group talks about that. It's really not as different as people think, but people talk about all of that.
I think one thing that impacts everybody is the economy, and this summer there's been a lot of talk on inflation, especially as certain professions with their jobs and wages don't keep up. And I'm curious what policies you'd like to see, especially on the federal level, to increase job growth, increase wages for people, and overall it would boost the economy.
Well, I mean, our jobless rate is very low, so we're doing well. But it's just the idea of how much you get paid in those jobs that you have. And people have gotten pay raises, but as you said, the pay raises have not kept up with the inflation. And inflation is a global issue, so, we can do some things, but it's still, a global issue. Definitely, we should push. I mean, we say $15 an hour. That's still not a whole lot, but I think we need to raise, our minimum wage federally, and I think that will help some. But I think some of the things that we've put in place, like just the bills we've passed, like the infrastructure bill, that'll put a lot of people to work. Tunnels, bridges, clean water, broadband for everybody. I think what we just did with the Inflation Act, lowering the cost of medicine for some folks, and what we did with the environment, that will put people to work, and not just minimum wage jobs. We've done things over the last few years that improve, workforce development, just the training that people have. So I think where things will get better. I know that I go grocery shopping also. I put gas in my car too, so I get it. But I think that everything is not in our hands. That we really are, a part of the world and what's going on in the world. And COVID has had a nasty impact, not only healthcare, but as far as the economy also, with the supply chain and those kind of things. And what we passed as far as like chips and manufacturing and all of that, I think that people will see the fruits of our labor.
Just to follow up real quick though, would you support a higher national minimum wage, like $15 or $20?
Oh.
Like what do you think would,
definitely.
would be enough?
I've always supported $15 minimum wage. I've always supported that. Yeah, I've always supported it. So, but again, even with that, it's still tough on people. I remember my son when he went to work. Actually, the job he has now, he makes a lot more now. But when he started, he was making $14.10, and every once in a while, I had to help him out. So, but everybody's not lucky to have a parent or someone that can help them out. So yeah, that is a big concern. And then the cost of housing, and it's hard for kids to move out, and those kind of things. And even, I know no one feels sorry for Congress, but we either pay 2 rents, 2 mortgages, or rent and a mortgage, because we have to have a place in D.C., and it's very expensive to live in D.C. Very expensive.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when I was in Danville, which again is a new part of your district, people said jobs and housing. Those are the 2 biggest concerns. So, it's good to hear that response from you. And one thing that I think is both economic and also agriculture, climate change, is the natural gas pipeline in Pembroke Township. And some of our viewers don't know about it, so could you just describe what that is and the costs and benefits of that project?
Sure. When I first went to Pembroke, which is about 10 years ago now, I mean, I'm sure I've driven through it before, but as the congressperson, I was so surprised at, the state of the area where, people had outhouses, they used propane gas, many or most did not have internet or broadband access or anything like that. And even though I know people want to move to a whole different way, but this will help them not only residentially, but help them with attracting business, between the gas and broadband, being able to go online, the internet. I think this will help them when it comes to economic development. And yes, this is just one stop, and it might change, a little later, but we thought it was important. One of my staff went down, and he was in, all the meetings representing me, and then we made a presentation to them, So, I mean, I think it's a good thing for the town. I know some people had issues with it, but they had to have some movement in a better direction.
Right. So how would you reconcile or react to some of the environmental and I think eminent domain concern as well from some farmers?
I get that, but the town would fail. I mean, they had to move in a direction. I think what the eminent domain has to be done in the most respectful way, to the farmers. And I'm not sure every little thing they worked out with it. And environmentally, people were using propane gas, and they had to pay for the gas, ahead of time before they would even get the gas. That is no way to live. I think what we're doing, part of it is humane, frankly.
Something that you touched on is broadband access, which is both a concern in rural communities, especially in Illinois, and urban areas. How did that project and other initiatives that you're working on seek to combat that?
Sure. Well, in urban areas, we hear more about people can't afford it, and then in rural areas, they don't have the infrastructure to have it. So many people worked on it, but it was led by actually bipartisan, and particularly people that represented rural areas, because that's and in the South, because the whip Jim Clyburn was a very big proponent of it. So we were able to work with them, and in the infrastructure bill, they'll get money to work on the infrastructure. We actually presented a check for $3 million to Pembroke to start working on their internet and broadband. But again, people couldn't do e-learning, couldn't apply for jobs, you can't do telehealth. And if you live in a rural area, all of those, especially telehealth, is extremely important.
How do you see climate change as impacting these issues and impacting farmers?
Oh, well, I was just on one of my farms, just and then watching the news, the floods, the very, very hot weather, like farmers, they live and die by the weather and how well their crops do. So hopefully with some of the things that we're putting in place, again, it's a worldwide problem. We can't solve all the issues, but hopefully with more attention being paid, more money being invested, that, we can't control the sun or the rain or whatever, but we can help people put a foundation in place that will help with it, and we can all lessen our carbon footprint.
One proposal that's been making riptides, but it struggled a bit, is the Green New Deal. What's your thought on it?
When I came, maybe a little bit after, no, it was a little after I came, Speaker Pelosi created a environmental committee to look at all of that, and Kathy Castor has been leading it, and I'm sure the Green New Deal was never a bill, it was an idea, that was put forth, and I'm sure some of the things that the ideas that were put forth have all been taken into consideration, and some recommended and some not. Everyone knows, at least on the side of the aisle I sit on, that something definitely needs to be done, and that's what we're trying to do.
Would you support it, or what you know of the Green New Deal and the way that it's conceived right now, would you support it?
Yeah, I don't know every specific area of it, but I know that, I would support. We need to do something. It's evident, that I want my grandchildren to be able to breathe, when they get older. I want there to be, a world there for them. So I do think we need to do, what's feasible, and then also as new generations are coming up, to teach them in school, what are better ways to save this planet.
Another life and death issue in a lot of ways is gun violence, and this is something that's touched you and that you've worked on very closely. You've worked on a bill with my hometown, New Jersey, Congressperson Tom Malinowski, to use the powers of the FTC to hold gun companies accountable. Can you just describe that bill for us?
Well, how it started was guns have been carved out of the consumer product safety. Like, there's more regulations on teddy bears, cribs, all of that, but not guns. They were successfully carved out, and we think that they should be put back in. and that we need to look at guns but the Consumer Product Safety Commission, as I was telling Tom, said they didn't have the resources, they didn't, it would be, tough to do. So he's actually taken up the mantle for me, because I remember when he called me about it to see if we can reintroduce, rework on, so that that there is some responsibility that the gun makers have, and that they have to go through a process, just like teddy bears, cribs, car seats, and those kind of things.
What else would you like to see? Because it's not getting better in a lot of ways, and
Sure.
there's been over 300 mass shootings this year, according to the Gun Violence Archive.
Sure. Well, for me, it's the mass shootings, but also what I brought to Congress were the everyday die-by-yourself shootings. Those when Highland Park happened, which was horrible, but in Chicago from July 1st to July 4th, I believe there were 89 shootings, and those people that die by themselves don't get moments of silence or anything like that. They're forgotten about. So 5 or 6 years ago, I stopped standing up for the moments of silence. I said, we stand up, we sit down, we do nothing, and I didn't want to be a part of that. Now, for the first time in 30 years, we did pass legislation. It wasn't everything we wanted, but we do feel that that legislation will help save lives. And we often hear, Chicago has the toughest gun laws, but what they don't talk about, what I was a big part of was trafficking and store purchasing, that we needed national laws because most of our crime guns come from Indiana and Wisconsin. They hate when I say that, but it's the truth. Since I've been in Congress, it's actually become easier to buy a gun in Indiana and Wisconsin than it was when I first came to Congress. So we need to ban assault weapons. Instead of what we have now, more severe background checks. If you can't buy a handgun until you're 21, you should not be able to buy an assault weapon until you're 21. So to me, that needs to be corrected also. We've always pushed for gun violence being seen as a public health crisis, and then have a report come out every year so that people can see the cost of gun violence. And not only the people that die, we talk about the people that die a lot. We don't talk about the people that have been maimed for life and how much that costs. We've spoken to many doctors, about that. But I know, the story is, they're trying to take your gun away. If you have it legally and you're not trying to hurt yourself or anybody else, we're not trying to take your gun away. But that's the story that was pushed for so long.
Do you think one of the reasons for inaction is not seeing the connection between both mass shootings and non-mass shootings, like you mentioned?
Well, I think that if we came in every day and we had a moment of silence individually, I think people see it, more now, but I just think that, some people feel like, and we get it, it's a way of life and that kind of thing. That might be true, but you can have your way of life, safely without what's happening to everybody else, just like locking up your guns. We know suicide is first, then homicides, and then accidents. So many, people get hurt that own guns, more so than hurt the person they think they're protecting their home with. So that's the other thing, we couldn't get that done, just more security and locking up your gun.
And then to put it a different way, this is something you just touched on, but reconciling Second Amendment rights, especially in a district that's full of diverse opinions on guns, with these protections that could save lives.
Sure. And I get the Second Amendment, but I have the right to play in a park, to go to the store, to go to school, to go to church, to go to a synagogue, to sit on my porch, to ride on a CTA bus. I'm just going through the ways I know that individuals, have died. I have a right to do those things too, and we know that when the Second Amendment was created, the world was a little bit different, and it's been so stretched, to me, it has become an excuse. But what about people's right just to live?
Before we finish up, another hot button issue is abortion rights, especially after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. What federal protections would you like to see put in place, yeah.
Well, we have the Women's, Protection Act, but I want women to be able to travel where they want to travel, first of all. I mean, I think it's a travesty what happened, that they overturned Roe v. Wade. That is not your business, what I do with my body, and they've truly overstepped, but women should have the right to travel. Places that are already safe havens should have the right to be safe havens. Doctors that do the procedure should not be afraid for their lives, because they are giving women choice. If something comes in the mail, a pill, that should be okay too. I think, like, if we can just make sure, those things are in place, it won't help everything, but it's very, very scary. When I think about Illinois, is an oasis. Thank God what happened in Kansas, and then we have Minnesota, but places are already overwhelmed, and it's just going to get worse. And the other thing that concerns me, I do a lot of work around maternal mortality, and the United States ranks very poorly as far as women giving birth and the amount of women that die each year, and black women die more. So now you're forcing people to have babies. So, I expect maternal mortality to rise because we're forcing people to have babies.
Yeah, can you just say a little bit more about your work and also how some of the strict abortion laws are going to create more medical emergencies? How are those issues interrelated?
Well, as I said, the United States ranks very poorly when it comes to delivering babies. 700 to 900 women die a year. Black women die 3 to 4 times the rate of white women. And depending, indigenous women, like in Washington, the state of Washington, die 8 times the rate. And in Illinois, actually, black women died 6 times the rate of white women. So that's now. If women are forced to have babies, and these might be women that don't have the same access that other people have, we know there is, a great inequality in healthcare and lack of access. There's a lack of, doctors of color, and it's been proven you do better when, the doc or the caretaker looks like you, or, can at least relate to your, experiences. So we see this as more harm for women having babies because they don't want, you're forcing something and they don't want to. They may not be able to afford it. They may not be able to have access, to health care. They may not have support around them. There's a lot of different reasons, but it's that woman's business.
Illinois is a bit of an oasis in this sense, but what can the state do to support people in neighboring states, right, that don't have those rights right now?
Well, they're already doing it. I've spoken to the head of Planned Parenthood here, and she said they're already overwhelmed, but Illinois is doing what they can do to, to have, arms open, that people are welcome and that they can get services here. And again, lucky that Minnesota, which is not that far away, and then Kansas, came through for us also. So hopefully, that's going to work. But yeah, I mean, we're oasis in many ways when it comes to policies and politics.
Before we close up, I want to finish with your elevator pitch of sorts. Again, some voters are just encountering you, and so what would you say? Why should they choose you as their representative?
If they look at my track record, I have a track record that I'm proud of. So I think that's, very, very important. I am a member that has integrity. I'm smart. I'm invested. This is not just a job to me. I really feel, this is just the truth, that I was put on this earth to be a public servant, and I think that I'm a good one.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
For Illinois Public Media, I'm Harrison Malkin, sitting down with Congresswoman Robin Kelly. For Illinois Public Media, I'm Harrison Malkin.